He definitely had a right to defend himself against the contact from Austin Metcalf. Austin Metcalf was arguably committing simple battery. That's a crime. You can defend yourself against simple battery. You just can't do it with deadly force.
So, to the point about the weight you were saying, according to the arrest report, he's 5'9", 130 pounds. That's a BMI of 19.1. I looked up, but I got 19.2. But I got to be honest, 5'9", 130 seems really frail.
That does.
Unreasonably frail.
Very frail. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's.
So I agree. I don't believe that's correct.
Yeah.
You know, I 5'9", maybe 140, 150. Maybe 150. The arguments I've seen.
I mean, we're going to get an autopsy report eventually
on Metcalf.
On Metcalf, right.
I believe already the statements were that he had like 30 pounds on him or something. That's what the argument from the left has been, I think.
And listen, 30 pounds is a lot. So if you do any kind of combat sports like wrestling or something like that, they separate you into levels by 8-pound gradations, right? So this would
even
be
less, 5 pounds.
Even less.
Yeah.
So it can make a difference, but we also have to consider the what we call, the lawyers call, the totality of the circumstances. This wasn't a back alley at 3 o'clock in the morning. This was a crowded environment. There's lots of people around. It's hard to believe they're all going to stand there and watch Austin Metcalf beat Karmelo Anthony to death in front of them. I mean, this is not going to end up being a sustained beating.
Yeah. Well, I think, Tim, to what you were saying earlier about the right's reaction to this, I think it points to this element that's running through society on both sides. I particularly because I thought, I lean to the right, I'm conservative, that these are some of my values in the campaigns and the support that we had, that the right was just as principled as the left. And what we've seen is the moment that the tables turn, all of a sudden, the same principles of free speech, of presumption of innocence that they championed loudly for these other cases, they've thrown out the window. Literally, just like, nope, I don't care about those things. It's fascinating to me. And it's just like this narcissism, this pride that's developed within our culture because we do have a phone and we think we have all the information at our fingertips. It's unfortunate. I think it goes to deeper issues within our society, but it's amazing to see it just as strong on the right as it was on the left and is on the left.
So actually the left is arguing, and I do not believe this is correct, that Austin Metcalf was 6'1" and 225 pounds, and that is, I'm going to go ahead and say, absolutely false. I've seen nothing to corroborate any of that, but that's the viral claim all over the internet. Newsweek says that his profile lists him as 6 foot. Really? Newsweek is reporting he was 6 foot 225.
He looks big in the picture. He looks like a heavy-set kid.
Okay. Newsweek says this. Newsweek says Metcalf was listed on the Frisco Memorial High School Huddle. He was listed on Huddle as 6 feet 225. I thought he was 5'9", 160. That's what I had been seeing. Newsweek says he was 6 foot 225.
Regardless of what's true, certainly the more there is a disparity of size and weight and power, the more favorable it's going to be for Karmelo Anthony.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you guys know that that's what was reported? I did not know this.
No.
Do you think that plays a role?
It plays a role, sure.
It's going to.
Does it change your view in any way?
No.
I just don't see it. Again, if this was an alley at 3 o'clock in the morning and there's no bystanders and you're worried about suffering a sustained beating by someone who outweighs you by 50 pounds, yeah, I could imagine that being a realistic threat.
Not a track meet surrounded by 500
track meet
people
with families and fathers and mothers. And again, they're not going to stand there and watch a beating to the death happen in front of them.
If I'm not mistaken, I think
there's a bunch of coaches.
There's like 3 videos that they've collected already.
Right.
Yeah, there's apparently there's more than that.
A school track meet with high schoolers and their phones. Yeah, probably live streamed it.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, and they did grab everybody's phone. The police did. That's in the police report.
Well, they're definitely. This is what the defense is going to do.
Yeah, this is what they have to do. Mm-hmm. Again, they have to craft an answer to that question. Was our client reasonably perceiving an unlawful imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury? The answer to that has to be yes in some form. So they have to take the evidence and they have to, like Lego blocks, and they have to build it into a narrative of innocence consistent with self-defense. I will point out, it's not their job to prove self-defense. It's the job of the prosecution to disprove self-defense beyond any reasonable doubt. So the defense doesn't have to show to the jury, hey, we have 80% evidence it was self-defense, or even 50%, or even 30%. They just have to say, listen, there's a reasonable doubt this could have been self-defense, and that's supposed to be an acquittal.
Having just learned that, again, what I had read before was that he was 5'9", 160. And I was like, oh, he's a high school athlete, so he's got some muscle on him, and this kid's not, or whatever. 6 foot, I'm imagining a scenario where he's sitting under a tent, this big guy comes up, and he thinks he's going to be justified in the event dude tries to touch him to use lethal force because of the disparity in size.
And he could be right. If there's a sufficient disparity of size.
What I mean to say is, I could be totally wrong on this. I'm just saying, in my mind, what I see is Anthony sitting there, and when he sees this big dude come up to him, he's thinking, if this guy tries to fight me, I'll be allowed to use a knife. He was thinking, like, I'm not going to try and run away. I'm not going to de-escalate. This guy can't touch me because I can do what I want.
It's certainly possible Carmelo Anthony believes that what he did was lawful self-defense.
I'm not saying that I think he thought in his mind what he was doing was self-defense. I think he thought the perception of it.
Oh, how other people would perceive it.
Right. Like, I don't have to get up. This big dude can't push me around. I'm allowed to use a knife because he's so big.
And then everyone else will agree that was lawful self-defense. Right. He might have been thinking.
I believe he felt disrespected because what we learned from the police report is that either it was raining or about to rain. And so I think he's like, I'm going to stand in this tent. I ain't staying in the rain. And when the dude told him, he's like, you can't make me stand in the rain. Who the F are you? You can't tell me what to do. And so he escalates it.
Well, that comes in with the provocation, which I think is going to be the massive hurdle that the defense is going to have to overcome.
I disagree with this.
Ooh.
Yeah, I could understand if he said, touch me, I dare you. Mm-hmm. I could understand if he said, touch me, I bet you won't. Something like that. But my perception of touch me and see what happens is 50-50. I understand it could be perceived as a provocation or a warning. And of course, the defense is going to say he was trying to appear tough and saying, do not touch me. Mm-hmm. So actually, I'll ask you, like, where the line is. Both of you view this as it was a clear provocation to say that.
I think there's a strong argument that this was provocation with intent, that this is akin to go ahead, take a swing, and see what happens. I understand your interpretation. I think it's perfectly reasonable. And I think reasonable people could disagree. So each side's going to have to make their argument.
That's why I think it's 50-50.
I will say this, however. Under Texas law, if it's decided it was provocation with intent, that obliterates self-defense, obliterates it. In fact, it's perfectly within the court's discretion to not give the jury a self-defense instruction at all. Wow. If he decides that the only interpretation of the evidence is a provocation with intent.
The judge could say, this is provocation, self-defense arguments.
Provocation with intent. In other words, not just provoke, like calling someone a name and trying to start a fight, but so one way to lose self-defense is to be the initial aggressor, right? Yeah. Throw the first punch. The other way is not to be the initial aggressor. It's to get the other guy to be the initial aggressor by provoking him to throw the punch. If you provoke with the intent of then using deadly force on someone, you're trying to fabricate a deadly force self-defense scenario, that obliterates your claim of self-defense.
So if he said...
And that would be the argument here, right? He had the backpack, he had his hand on the knife, and he's goading the guy. He's provoking the guy to do something so he'll have an excuse to stab him. That's provocation with intent.
But I do think a lot of people in a lot of cases would argue that if you felt threatened and put your hand on your gun and said... it's something to the effect of, I will shoot you, don't do it. You don't want to find out what comes next.
It's a difference between self-defense, what you just described, and provocation with intent. Provocation with intent, you're not actually scared of that person. You're trying to provoke them to do something so you'll have an excuse to stab them.
So the challenge I see with that is, if he reached and grabbed the knife and said, hit me, do it, come on, hit me, I would say that was premeditated murder.
You don't think there's a difference between what he said and what you just said?
When you tell someone, see what happens... The reason I do that is to threaten them not to do it. I don't, if I want someone...
In my mind, I would be saying, don't touch me or see what happens. Not touch me and see what happens.
Yeah.
I feel like
an invite.
Touch me and see what happens is... What if he said, if you touch me, I'll stab you?
I still think that's different than telling someone, touch me.
I'm asking, like, let's say he clarified his intention. He said, if you put a hand on me, I will stab you.
To me, that's just a defensive statement. I'm prepared to defend myself. If you do this thing, if you cross this line, I'm prepared to use defensive force.
When you say see what happens, what is the expectation of what will happen?
There's going to be a defensive use of force consequence.
So why would you argue that doesn't qualify for it?
Because in one case, you're telling the person not to do the aggressive act, and in the other case, you're telling the person to do the aggressive act.
I certainly understand the way you're saying it. My view is largely just there's a lot of people in this country who are going to say that's not a threat, that's a warning. Like I feel like if you went to
And
Times
I'm sure
Square,
that's how the defense will characterize
if you go to
that.
Times Square and you walk around and ask people, you're going to find 50-50. They're going to be like, you're warning them. And the other side are going to be like, you're provoking them. It'll be a mixed reaction.
Right.
That's why I'm saying I don't see it as so clear as to call it immediate provocation. Like, obviously, he should not have said that because that's a tough guy statement.
Right. I understand. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I think reasonable people can disagree on that point. I just wanted to point out that if someone does conclude it was provocation with intent, there is no self-defense here.
That'll be interesting. Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon. So subscribe and come hang out.